You've probably heard the term customer experience. It gets tossed around a lot, as does company culture and how do you deliver authentic service. Well, that's the focus of today's episode.
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
And to help discuss that, I've got a franchise CEO. His name is Jonathan Weathington. He's an emerging franchise, but he's got 20 units. But I don't want to hear about me. I want to hear from him. Jonathan, welcome to Fordify Live.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ford. Appreciate it very much.
So, my team reached out to you. We look for emerging franchise brands that are growing. We like to interview, startups and emerging all the way up to, those brands that have, thousands and thousands. But, the true entrepreneurs. So if you're listening to this now, we're live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places. And this show is about business growth. So even if you're not involved in franchising, stay tuned in because you're going to get nuggets of wisdom. So Jonathan, how did you get involved in entrepreneurship and then becoming a CEO of a franchise brand?
Sure, it's been a little bit of an odd road, I guess you could say. I've always been a little bit entrepreneurial, and so I started my first business and cutting grass like many young guys, and coming up doing that in late middle school and junior high, and even before I had means of transportation to get there. My dad used to drive me around, and I'd unload the lawnmower out of the back of the truck, and I'd cut a yard, and he'd sit there in the air conditioning listening to country music and watch me and give me a Gatorade when I got back into the truck and go to the next yard. So that was kind of my first splash into it. But then my very first official job outside of that was working for a franchisee of PostNet. And PostNet, as you know, still around, still kicking. And they're, packaging and shipping services along with print and some other things. And so I really got a good taste of what an actual small business was, meaning, it was a husband and wife run concept. Husband and wife run franchise location is actually still operational today. Kind of a family run business. So their daughter worked there. They had a couple of other employees. I was hired when I was able to drive. The day I got my license, I reported for my first day of work. And so I've always worked. But one of the things that that job taught me was kind of entrepreneurial spirit. I got to see it live as a 16-year-old. And that was really, really cool, where you've got franchisees who are operating the day-to-day for the most part, just like any other franchisee, but they have things that they follow. They're dictated by the franchisor. They have to follow, general business rules of the municipality or the city that they're in. They have to pay their rent. They have bills that they have to figure out how to pay themselves, all of those things. So I was exposed to that pretty early. When I went to high school, I started tutoring on the side and making a little side cash. And then that continued well into college and even into grad school. And so I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always thought,
Right.
There's nothing better than kind of reaping your own rewards, so to speak. And so for me, it's kind of at the heart of what I'm doing. How I became the CEO of Shuckin Shack was I knew the entrepreneurs that started it. And so I was working at an adjacent business a couple doors down from Shuckin Shack for one of the co-founders, Sean. And I became his general manager of that business while I was paying for grad school and also while I was in grad school seasonally, and really saw the build of Shuckin Shack. So I was actually a customer, which was a pretty unique perspective on my side. And the co-founders of the business, Matt Pickenen and Sean Cook, opened the location in 2007. And I got to see them build the unit. And then I got to see the first summer it was open, and just what a rabid following they developed. And I think one of the things that allowed them to do that was they had never been in the restaurant industry before.
Isn't that funny? So, I agree. Yeah.
So all they knew how to do was to treat people well, which
right.
is a pretty unique position to be in whenever you've never been in an industry, but you have great people skills. That's kind of how Shuckin Shack grew. And so, yes, we serve, high quality American cult products. We serve great spirits. It's a great time. It's more of a bar atmosphere, so a little bit laid back. And I got to see the business grow, and really just the 3 summers following that I worked there just grow leaps and bounds. I mean, every summer there was a longer line. And so I kind of fell in love with it. My first experience was as a customer. And, it was very simple to me. Hey, you're treating people well. They want to come back. It's a good time. Clearly people are here at all hours. There's a line out the door before it opens. And so I just kind of fell in love with the idea of, I guess, being an entrepreneur, but more so being attached to a brand like that. I've been pretty fortunate in my career early career through high school and everything. Worked for some really good companies, Blockbuster Video and Best Buy, when they were kind of kings in their industry, in the retail industry. And then I worked for Hilton Hotels briefly, and then I moved to the North Face for a while after I got out of college and grad school. And I always returned to that feeling of Shuckin Shack. And so when the guys approached me in 2014, after I'd helped them open a second location, they said, listen, we're thinking about franchising. We know enough about it, meaning it's essentially other people
Right.
growing the business for you, but we're looking to bring on someone potentially that might have a good understanding of kind of brand. And I had that great understanding from the previous positions I had worked elsewhere. And so they called me in early 14. I came down for the weekend and hung out for a little bit. We talked about franchising. And I said, yeah, let's do it. I was kind of at a point where I wanted to get back into business more for myself. And it was a good opportunity for me. They didn't really know what they could pay me. I ended up sleeping on one of the co-founders' couches for a year. And because when you start a business like a franchising company, it's exceptionally expensive. It's very risky. And on top of that, we're in one of the riskiest industries, which is the restaurant industry. So you just don't know if it's going to work. And so I did that for about a year, started to take off. And so I felt more comfortable with it. And I was 29 in October. They called me into a board meeting and said, we're thinking about hiring a CEO. And I said, that's great. I would love to learn under someone. And they said, that person is you. And I said, oh my. And so that's kind of how it fell into my lap. I guess I was the only guy in the room. And so I was naturally promoted. I was the only employee at that time. And so I guess it wasn't that far of a leap for me to take the seat.
Well, the real journey here, when I listen to your story, most of the CEOs and the people that I interview, whether they're founders, like I had, John Hewitt from Jackson Hewitt on the show, and I've had Charles Watson from Tropical Smoothies, and all these other people, including other business owners like Nito Cobain, the CEO of the chairman of High Point University, and so forth. And they all come from the ones that are successful have a foundation in critical thinking and taking action and risk, right? Because if you're going to be in business, you're either really adverse to risk and you want to take critical, or you want to work for somebody. I mean, there's nothing wrong. You need both. Like I've got staff, you have staff. There's a absolute location. If you're listening to this now and you're a staff member, you serve a very valuable part in the organization. But to lead success, if you're in a business and you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, you all understand that you're wearing multiple hats. And these terms that we started the show off of, company culture and, the guest satisfaction, authentic service. Those are words that get tossed around a lot. I'm doing a series right now for another franchise brand in 7 cities. And, they're talking what differentiates them. They're a very highly competitive industry. It's not the restaurant industry. And they all said service. So I said, okay, well, let's check. And so, I pull up their Google reviews. I look at their Yelp reviews. I look at their, and they have an opinion of what they think, but the marketplace has another opinion, right? And so I always tell audiences and brands, you don't own your brand. You don't own your Shuckin Shack brand. You don't own it. Yeah, well, physically as the CEO, but what I'm saying is it's the perception in the mind of your prospects. And so all we can do as business owners is influence it. We don't own it. And so, you've been successful with the 20 units. What's your growth? I have a couple questions around growth. So you've got 20 units now, 25 units is like that first level, and then it goes to like 50 units. And it's not always about being bigger. Sometimes, I've talked to a lot of people that are very successful at 20. They're happy. That's their brand model. There's nothing wrong with that either. It's not about more. Some people are like, no, I want to grow it up to 100 units and flip it to a private equity group. Okay, well, where's taking care of the customer in that, right? Just because you're getting a bunch of numbers, doesn't mean you should do it. So what are the growth for Shuckin Shack? Where do you guys see yourself in the future?
Sure. I mean, as you can imagine, I get asked this question often, and I want to open healthy restaurants with good people. That's almost always my answer. If that number is 100, then we'll do 100. If that number is 30, then we'll do 30. If that number is 1,000, then we'll do 1,000. It's very, very important for us to not lose sight of what's gotten us here, which is serving people well and making sure that they return. And so that is our primary interest. and whatever we do as far as how we grow our brand, all the way down to how we select franchisees when we're going through that interview process and that discovery process. We are far more concerned with the people that we bring into our organization. Sometimes that's 3 a year, sometimes that's 1 a year, sometimes that's 6 a year. But we are so intent on that process so that we can open healthy units with good people. And so
Yeah, I think that's
my standard answer.
Yeah, I think that's great, Jonathan. And you need an answer like that because, as someone who works with a lot of franchise brands like yours to help them grow, I mean, I'm a keynote speaker. I'll speak at annual conferences, but I work in franchise development. How do you as a franchise brand position yourself in the market? Because the IFA has the statistics on how many get started each year and fail, but more fail than are successful. So the odds are just like in any business. So I like the fact that you have a really clear value proposition, healthy restaurants with good people. That's so important for understanding the clarity around that. And I do have some questions around, first of all, the restaurant industry has got to be the hardest. Like when I'm out with my wife, I'm like, I spoke for Rings and Rings. And it was post COVID and, they used to have 96 people in their staff and they could only get 40. And I said, well, I don't understand. You've got half of your mystery shop. You got half your restaurant closed off. And they said, 1, we can't get the staff. 2, we'd rather have a line and have people get seated and served. But if we seat them and they don't get served, then they're upset. So like so they had to, manage the expectations. Right. So, it was all about that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I can't get managers. I said, well, I said, you're paying them really well. He said, look, Ford, let me tell you, half the time I interview, you get 50 applications, you invite 10 to show up, 3 show up, you hire the first one and they don't show up. Like, it's just it's my show. So I can say shit show. It's my show. So I can cuss and you can cuss. This is for educational and informational purposes only. Don't get offended. We're just being real here. So anyway, I was asking him, I said, so tell me, what was your challenge? He said, let me tell you a story, Ford. I hired a manager, trained her. The first week on the job, she was doing pretty good. And part of the closing procedures at the restaurant is they have to sweep the kitchen and make sure that everything's clean, right? I'm sure you have at Shuckin Shack some type of process. So he just happened to stop in during closing and the floor hadn't been swept and everybody was leaving. So he said, hey, to the manager, new manager, would you mind sweeping before you leave? And she took the broom, threw it on the ground and said, F you, I'm out of here, and quit. Just from a manager saying, hey, can you sweep the floor? Like, it wasn't clean the bathrooms and, and so I said, I can't believe it. He said, no, let me tell you, the work ethic right now, the fact that they know that they can walk right across the street and get another job, at 16 restaurants. And now, so I'm in, my businesses have always been in sporting goods, automotive, childcare, product businesses. I was insurance and sales. I never ran a restaurant. And I mean, I haven't even I run a kiosk in a mall when I had some things. I had a company called the Balloon Wrap Factory. We did gifts during holidays. There's no freaking way with the supply chain issues, with the people. I have no patience. Those of you that know me or been listening to this right now, I wouldn't ever do it. How do you do it then to where you can keep your staff and manage it? And then the second question I want to talk about is the other stuff with the pay stuff. But what do you do with the culture? How do you keep your employees?
You talk to people. And that sounds crazy, man. I'm telling you, but it makes all the difference on earth. I have a very similar story from the CEO that told you that story. It'll take me 30 seconds.
No, tell me.
We were so hard up for employees over COVID. This was July of 2020. And it was hard to hire people. You could not retain anyone. And so I was leaving my regular CEO job every day. I was going to our nearest company unit downtown, and I was cooking in the kitchen until 11 o'clock at night. And I had a guy that we had just hired, and I was on the line, and we were in the middle of a shift. It's 6:30 on, Thursday night. And I needed something. I don't even remember what it was at this point. And I said, hey, buddy, can you hand me that? And he completely stops and says, buddy, I'm not your buddy. And I said, time out. I want you to turn around. There's a door right there. And when you go out that door, you can take a left or a right. There's an exit at either end. You're done. I nipped it in the bud right then. I terminated it almost on spot in front of everyone, which I generally don't do. I'm not a fan of that. But the second he walked out the door, the tension in the room eased. And so what that allowed me to do is to have a better relationship with the people that were still there. He was clearly causing problems that I just wasn't seeing. And I was able to talk to them and say, what's going on? Like, yeah, he was demanding. The language that he using wasn't helping everybody else. He wasn't showing teamwork. Anytime you ask him to do anything, he would put up a fight. And so that's a gross example, obviously. But I think back to it, you talk to your employees. I think that's important. Yes, there are, hard line quantitative needs of every employee. You have to pay them better. You've got to offer them benefits if you're able to do so. But you also have to have conversations. We have been able to retain employees. An employee that was on their way out had given notice to quit because they needed to find a different job for whatever reason, because of childcare schedule or because
Right.
the restaurant industry is tough. You're working most nights and weekends if you want to make good money as far as front of the house is concerned. But we have retained an employee in a 10-minute conversation. I don't have the money to fix my car, and so I have to find a job where I can walk or take the bus. Okay, well, how much is that going to cost? Well, it's $250 more than what I can budget right now. Okay, well, if I got you $250 by the end of day today, is that going to keep you on staff? Oh, yeah, that'll definitely help. That's all I needed to know. Because if it costs us $2,300 to train an employee, why would I not
Right.
whip out my wallet and whip out $250, hand them the cash and say, thanks for sticking around. I'll see you tomorrow. You have to talk to your employees. If you're not talking to your employees, asking about their lives, coming up with a way that you can benefit them, it's got to be a mutual beneficial relationship, and you're not going to retain them.
100%. I had to learn that lesson the hard way in my businesses. I grew up in the projects of North Minneapolis and, was orphaned, blah, blah, blah. And I started my first business, and I've always been a driver. Right. And so when I invented some products in sporting goods, and I built the company up to 140 employees and $50 million in gross sales, not profit. But,
Sure.
grew the company up. And, I was always in the driver position. And then decades went by, and then I had turnover, and I didn't understand it. When I started to learn more about the concepts of leadership and really studying and leaning deeply into leadership, that's when I understood the personality styles are all different, the motivations are different. And then now if you fast forward to the different generations in the marketplace, what's going on in company cultures, what's going on across the country, the economic, the political, society, everything. And I, like talking to your employees, making sure that you understand what their needs are. You have to understand, what is your cost to acquire a new customer? What is your cost to acquire a new employee? And then how much you should invest. The other flip side of that is only quality people. Because just like you found out in that situation, if you have one bad apple, can ruin the whole bunch. I've heard years ago, it's easier to run with 1,000 people in the right direction than with one person tied behind your ankle. And so sometimes only quality people, sometimes you just need to free people up for new opportunities. And it's hard because you're like, I need someone to work. But if you keep that person in the boat, they'll sink your boat. And so sometimes I know my team hates my analogies that I just come up with the top of my head. Sometimes you just need to kick them out and let them swim with the sharks. And my team was like, look, politically, Ford, you should not say that. But I don't really care, because as a business owner, my most valuable asset are my employees, my staff, that they take care of the customers, and then the customers. Obviously, without them, you don't need anything, right? So, guest satisfaction is so important. The reason you guys are so popular, one of the reasons why we reached out to have you on the show, was because you are a unique brand. And so what do you tell people when someone says, what makes Shuckin Shack unique? What do you tell your customers, or what do they say?
Sure, I think there's a couple of different things. I think generally speaking, I don't know where you're based, but name one other oyster bar chain. Let's use chain. Name one other oyster bar chain. You probably
can't even name one here.
Right, exactly. So there's natural differentiation there.
Right.
Just from a macro market perspective, there's not a whole lot like us in the market. Our primary competition is going to be mom and pop.
Yep.
That is a one-off location. And a lot of those are exceptionally well run. I visit most of them. I love going to other oyster bars. Oysters, shellfish, seafood as a whole is a growing sector of the restaurant business.
Yep.
A vast majority of that is cooked in restaurants. People are afraid to cook seafood at home. And so that is the biggest differentiator. I will cook burgers on the grill or steaks or grilled chicken or make sandwiches at home, or, I won't bake pizza. But outside of that, most people are the same way. They're going to choose their primary proteins, which are chicken and beef. And then they're going to leave seafood to an in-person dining experience. So that's our biggest differentiator. I would say the second one is authentic service. And I mean that in the truest form whatsoever, in that all of our locations, they all have a different personality. They all have a little bit different culture. But we allow our customers to determine that. We don't teach spiels in our restaurants for our front of the house staff. Our bartenders and our servers or any of them, if you were to walk into any Shuckin Shack on earth, I don't care if you ever hear "Welcome to Shuckin Shack." They know where they are. They probably looked us up online. They saw the sign over the building. They saw the graphic on the door. They know exactly where you are. You don't have to name the name. You should tell them, "Have a seat. I'll bring some drinks right over." Make it as authentic as possible, like you might experience on the Carolina coast or the Florida coast or Texas coast or anywhere else you are. That's the biggest differentiating factor. And then when they get to the table, treat them like they belong. Read the table. That's what we're asking our employees to do. And I think that's a big differentiating factor between us. We don't have to tell the specials to everyone.
Right.
They're not interested. It's just simply not necessary. It doesn't help you grow sales. It creates this kind of experience and conversation with the customer that is forced, that they experience in many other restaurants. And it is not effective when it comes to our brand.
Well, and I think it's really important that you guys that's on brand. So not only, for the type of restaurant it is, that's first thing. Second, the locations. Third, the experience. So it really is authentic. So I can see that they're going to feel like it's the mom and pop field, although the business owner has a system so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So that's what makes it super authentic. I always say, hire for attitude, train for skills. Fire fast, hire slow. Now, I make the mistake. As an entrepreneur, I've kept employees way too long sometimes. And
we all have.
Because I'm like, because I want someone to help coach me. I'm coachable. And so I think, they're going to be coachable. And I'm like, no, that dog doesn't hunt. It's time to free them up for new opportunities because, the dead weight, like I'm telling you, dead weight sometimes is worse. So if you're out here and you're listening to this episode right now, or maybe you're listening to the podcast on the Business Growth Show, what we're talking about here is really take a good look at the relationship that you have with your customer. Make sure you have a culture in your organization that allows for open feedback, but also set standards. Make sure that those standards are easily duplicatable and communicated. What I've really liked about talking with you, Jonathan, is you're giving really clear, direct answers. You remind me, I don't know if you know Charles Watson. He's the CEO of Tropical Smoothies.
I've met him in passing and I've listened to him a lot. I like Charles.
He's really kind of edgy, but what I got when I got to speak at their conference is he did this thing with his franchisees, Ask Me Anything. And he did it pre-conference, like the conference. I think I was the opening keynote. I started at like 9:00, but he came into the room at 8:00. He had it on the agenda. You want to talk to me? Come in there at 8:00. And I'm not giving anything confidential away from his brand or anything, but he was able. What he did from stage, just sitting there with a microphone, answering questions, just direct. And I go to a lot of conferences. I just got back from a conference last night. I leave again Monday for Austin and then to Minneapolis. So to see a CEO connect with his franchisees, to hear franchisees in the room give credit to hey, I've been a franchisee for 20 years. It was really cool because he is a no BS. So I know I've interviewed a lot. He just always comes to the top of my mind. And you reminded me of that because, you know who you are, you're authentic, who you show up. And that's what makes it carry through the brand because they know, yes, there's standards. You have to follow the standards. But this is the experience we're aiming for. And just like you said with that one guy, I'm not your buddy. I had a guy who worked for me for 7 years and I really thought he was a hero. And everybody around me kept telling me, hey, this guy's, he's just domestic terrorism is what the words that they use. I said, I don't get it. And so, no, he's saying one thing in the room, but it's disruptive. And finally it got to a point where it was time to, part ways. That's the best decision. But, it's just like a bad divorce or something. You don't know when you're in it. You think, oh, I can save it. And sometimes it's best to let them go. Question about what's going on right now in California. And for those of you listening, this is not a political show. I have no political affiliation with anybody. But as an entrepreneur, what I see going on right now for business owners, including franchises, and this, I think it's just bullshit what's going on with the $20 an hour wage in California. How in the hell are they're just going to have to shut down. I can't imagine paying that when you go in the restaurant industry, obviously you've been in it way, way more. I speak to those guys, but you're in it. When you work in that job, it is an entry-level job. It's a job where you get to learn skills, you get to learn life skills, you get to learn leadership. Sometimes it becomes a career. Like I spoke for Freddy's Frozen Custard, and they welcome new people that have skills and they train them. And so it's not just about the pay. They're not the highest paid, but they create a great learning experience. What's going to happen if they try to make that across the country? I'm just curious to talk to you about that, because I just pretend it's just me and you talking here. I can't believe it.
So I am inclined to agree with Danny Klein, who wrote an article for FSR recently that said, the average wage increase in California right now is about 17%, or at least 17%. And what we have seen as far as consumer pricing increase has just been between 4 and 8%. And his thesis was, we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I agree with that statement in the sense that, look, the data is not there yet. I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say, this is going to happen and that's going to happen and that's going to happen. I think naturally speaking, especially when you look at us as restaurateurs, we figure out a way to get it done. It doesn't matter what happens. We figure out a way. COVID, March 17th, 2020, all the way through end of 2021, we just figured it out. We're agile. That's what we learned to do. And so while I agree people should be paid better, you're right. The restaurant industry is a stopping point for many people. It's a quick stop through for many people on their way to the next thing. I'm the perfect example. I didn't work restaurants working through college. I worked in retail, and that's the exact same way. It's a different arm of the same body. And so a vast majority of people that come through restaurants that work in the kitchen or as bartenders or servers or dishwashers or whatever, hosts and hostesses, they're only there for a short amount of time. But some people can turn it into a career.
Right. It just depends on if it's right for them. Yeah.
That's right. If it's right for them. And some people will go back to it. Me being the perfect example, my first job out of grad school was banking. I felt that was going to be part of my career. I learned very quickly it's not what I wanted to do. Right. I needed to be in customer service in some way, shape, or form. And so going back to everything going on in California with, joint employer, which has been struck down, and, wage increases and minimum wage. And regardless of what happens, I like to look at the bright side of things. Generally speaking, I am bullish on us, meaning us as restaurateurs. We are going to figure our shit out. It's going to happen. We don't have any choice. If we want to have a good concept, if we want to serve people well, and we want to serve a product that they can't normally get at home, then we'll just figure it out.
Yeah, I went through the airport. I flew through Chicago and the Philadelphia airport. When I was in Chicago, I was in a hurry to go from one to the other, and I didn't want a burger. I love burgers, but I was like, oh, what do I? And I went to this restaurant. I didn't recognize the brand name, but I went up and I grabbed some sushi, and then I got some ramen soup. $47. Like it was $47. Like, and but here's the point. Am I going to pay it? Yeah, I paid it, so it's
choice you have.
That's my point. I mean, I wasn't expecting $40. Mm-hmm. And then I got to the next airport. It was 4 hours later. My flight got delayed, and where the hell did I eat? I don't know where I ate. I ate at one of the little bar in the restaurants, and I had I think I had a hamburger, and it was $12. And I just thought to myself, it was a great meal. I mean, it was a great meal, but so I think price, I always tell people, cause I'm not the cheapest keynote speaker, and I'm certainly not the cheapest consultant. My fees start at a very high fee. And I always tell my people about price. You don't win on price. Yours always comes down to value. Anytime any says a price question, it always comes back to value. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to have to raise the prices to a certain extent, but with that, if they can give a crap factor, if the person behind the counter has the communication to where they don't say, yeah, the prices are crazy. So what I'm working with organizations on is teach your staff how to overcome that natural resistance it's just a tier, just like everything else. It's gonna level out because it's gonna become part of the norm. We're gonna do it. People need to eat. They're gonna go out. It's like when I first invented my sporting goods rack, it was an oak rack that went from floor to ceiling, sandwiched between the floor and the ceiling. So I invented that product, and people told me, Jonathan, it would never sell. How are you gonna sell a bike rack for $200 when they can buy a hook for 99 cents? I'm like, I want my bikes to be art in my living room. I'm not trying to put a hook. Just like if I go out and I want seafood, I want seafood. Okay. I want a quality experience.
That's it. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is value. It's perceived value. And I think that's where, when you look at full service, especially, meaning you have a server coming to the table, people are there for an experience. This is not, listen, you could go to, I'll be the first to admit, I love Captain D's. I think their whitefish is excellent. I enjoy their fried whitefish. I like eating it. You don't go to Captain D's and spend 55 minutes there. You go to Captain D's and spend 18 minutes there. Or more than likely not, I don't know what their split is, 70% of the time you go through the drive-thru.
Right.
However, when you come to Shuckin Shack, we have no drive-thrus. You're going to spend 55 minutes in a seat. Here's why. Because you're going to get a domestically caught product that's of high quality. You're going to get exceptional, authentic service. There's some TVs around. If you want us to turn it to your favorite sports game, we carry all the packages, not a problem. And you're going to feel like you're at the coast in a relaxed environment. You're going to enjoy a couple beers, and then you're going to go home. That's an experience. It's just like, listen, I mean, this is maybe a poor analogy, but like when I go to Las Vegas, I set a budget. This is what I'm going to gamble. This is what I'm willing to lose. That is an experience. It is not just about me being terrible at poker. It is also about the experience surrounding it. So would I spend this in another city on a sporting event? Would I pay $300 for, great seats at Dodger Stadium? No question about it. There's no question. And so I am after that experience, and I'm willing to transact at that level because of the experience associated with it.
Yeah. So those of you listening, if you're a business owner, I'd say mystery shop your business, see how the phones are answered, see how what is the inside of the facility look like, or if you're a service business, what are your customers saying? What's your net promoter score? If you're asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it you do business with us in the future? How likely would you refer us to a client or friend? So that's really the key. So any closing thoughts? I really appreciate you carving time out of your day to be on this episode. Any closing thoughts that you want to leave people with, either about what you see the future on, or just any closing thoughts?
I mean, I'm a huge fan of our industry as a whole, and the retail industry and small business. I'm inclined to believe that you should double down on your strengths and work to refine those and make them even better, and make sure that the product that you're offering is unique and repeatable.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. This is Ford from Profit Rich Results. We go live Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we've been talking today with Jonathan. I want to say your last name right. I know you, but
Weathington.
Yeah, Weathington. Okay, I've been doing it right, but then I'm like, I had a brain fart all of a sudden as we get ready to close the show. So if you stuck around this long, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.